I would like to share with you my two profound near-death experiences. My first NDE was distressing. Most distressed experiencers are afraid to talk about evil's existence, depressed, divorced from their spouse, and have other social problems. In my experience, I was allowed to see, feel, and understand life from a diverse perspective. All beings are given that rite of passage into God's domain. My first accident occurred around 12:30 p.m. on July 2, 2000. I was up on a ladder painting the chimney of our home when I fell 28 feet to the ground and hit my head on a landscape timber. I should have broken my neck upon impact and died. My wife and son witnessed my fall. Tears came to my eyes as I write this, because of the shock my wife and son must have felt watching me hit the ground. They heard the crunching sound of the injuries to my body and saw an endless stream of blood coming from my head. They did not know at the time whether I was dead or alive. The Spirit of God didn't allow me to feel this extreme pain. I arrived at the hospital around 1:30 p.m. and was immediately taken into the trauma room. The emergency room physicians recognized my serious injuries and stopped the bleeding. While examining me, they discovered that I had broken the entire left side of my face, which meant that the bone structure above and below my eye was crushed and required reconstructive surgery. My eye was pushed back into my skull. The impact of the fall broke both wrists. After their initial examination, the doctors realized that my traumatic brain injury was critical due to brain swelling, so they decided to delay any surgery until they were able to determine if the frontal lobe of my brain was swelling internally or externally. The nurses provided care for my wife when I was given last rites. God was in control of me physically and spiritually, revealing a spiritual realm that exists in the cosmos. This distressing NDE was more evil than my tour in Vietnam as a combat infantryman, where I lived the horror of war and witnessed the manifestation of evil upon a people and their leaders. As I traveled, I can't honestly tell you the order of things as they happened, but it was real. I was being attacked by spirits that wanted to penetrate my soul. Then I saw what looked like oceans and oceans of souls in an evil dominion. There were hundreds of millions of lost loved ones. I felt their horror, pain, and torture. The wailing and hurt they were projecting at me were extremely intense. They were unrelenting, and all I could do was scream. But then the Spirit of God shielded me from these acts of violence. When I first shared this with my wife and children, I couldn't stop crying. At some point in this spiritual journey, my human nature and free will were brought forward, and I felt the immoral acts that I committed in my life. I have done things that I'm not proud of, and experienced life's pleasures along the way. Evil does confuse and deceive us during our spiritual transition by using our traits, revenge, greed, sexual desires, obsessed with power and beyond, against us. I recognize these traits as forewarnings to God's creation. In my near-death experience, I had to make a choice: evil's realistic temptations or God's love. I chose God's love. I crawled, and it felt like I was going against a spiritual force to reach my rite of passage. I was guided by God's loving light. I crossed through a spiritual barrier or cosmic dialectic. I know it's real. Without the love of God, we may find ourselves on the wrong side. Our prayers help those deceived by evil. Then I saw the entry into heaven and stood before God. I was immersed in His incredible love and peace. I never had felt such feelings of radiance in my life, and I can't wait to go back. I was given my first message: take care of your family. Before I awoke. This has been deeply personal to me, and I am humbled to be a messenger with this declaration to you, my extended family. While I was hospitalized, the healthcare workers responded well, considering the critical circumstances. I came out of unconsciousness 3 days later. My wife said that I awoke with a spirit of gentleness, love, kindness, and patience. Upon recuperation, I shared my experiences with my wife and family. Their love and open-mindedness helped me recover, which is advice to all who care for a person who just had a near-death experience. I did not tell workers about my NDE because I felt humbled and overwhelmed by the love of God. I still have my faults. Just because I survived, it doesn't mean that evil has ceased. In the ensuing years, I learned how to understand the power of prayer. I realized that our Supreme God's absolute love is more powerful than evil's deceptions. My second NDE. My second life-threatening NDE was not like the first. On February 23, 2012, I underwent what should have been outpatient surgery at a hospital in Oregon due to sleep apnea. My surgery included septoplasty, inferior turbinoplasty, and uvulopalato-pharyngoplasty, UPPP. Based on what my wife understood, the anesthesiologist did not properly dose my surgery. I suffered a negative pressure pulmonary edema, so both of my lungs filled up with blood and fluids. Almost simultaneously, I incurred acute respiratory distress, which caused my throat airway to swell and close. I was in the intensive care unit for 3 days, but I survived. The staff responded admirably, and the nurses encouraged my wife during the entire recovery. While healing, I told my wife that I was sorry I came back. My rehab was grueling and bittersweet because surgery was a painful failure. I do not recall a spiritual journey, only being given a message. Again, I felt humbled by another incredible message to share with God's creation. It is more important than my return. God is ageless. He is the supreme God of all creation. His absolute love for all his creation is eternal. Our spirituality, consciousness, and free will are his gifts to us. Evil continues to grow. I truly realize that God is bigger than our planet. In my search to make sense of my NDEs, I found IANS. This community of professionals has conducted some incredible exploration into distressing NDEs and spiritual afterlife. Their research helped me expand my knowledge of our survival of consciousness. To assure you of my good mental health, my wife of 43 years insisted I have a neuropsych evaluation. My doctor's diagnostic impression for a senior person over 67 falls between mild cognitive impairment and very early dementia. I am healthy. I am here only because of God's love for all his creation. I hope we have the willpower to discern the truth from fake news, trust God, and are motivated to help one another. I realize life is not fair, so I make the best of my situation by sharing my story. After effects. After writing papers for IAN's international conference themes and publishing my 2 near-death experiences globally on the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation's website, I ask for your open-mindedness in considering my after effects. I used Nancy Evans Bush's books, Dancing Past the Dark and The Buddha in Hell, as references and support. She was the executive director and later president of IANS and a member of its board of directors. She is considered a world expert on distressing NDEs. I am here to validate her conclusion that the love of God exists in the spiritual afterlife, as does hell, evil. I took note of Bruce Grayson, Maryland. Comments in the forward portion of Dancing Past the Dark * state, reality is both less than what we think it is and more. Bush reminds us that every enduring faith tradition describes spiritual involving confrontations with darkness, as well as light, adversity, and suffering, as a pathways to transformation. These quests may be frightening and painful and agonizing, but they are trials rather than punishments, and they may lead to invaluable spiritual gifts. They may not be gifts we expected, but we never diminished by them. I discovered while reading that other experiencers return from their NDE with unexpected gifts for healing, talents, acquired awareness, psychic empathy, sensitive to electricity, and no fear of death. I believe materialism, media, and the spiritual force of evil is adversely overwhelming our senses, impacting our lifestyle behavior, and is influencing our conscious willpower to discern right from wrong. I agree with Alice R. Turner, author of The History of Hell, comments suggesting a need to change in the person's life and/or revaluation of what really matters, not power, not money, but love, knowledge, and service. In my life's journey, I have been reborn spiritually. Serving our supreme God of all creation is an honor. My first NDE was distressing. I acquired an awareness of the spiritual power of evil and deception. Since my NDEs, it is a challenge to balance life after surviving a war, now living the current affairs of our time, the pandemic, economic recession, and public unrest. As these events unfold with so many unknowns, the significance of God's first message, take care of your family, is pertinent as we live our reality. My second life-threatening NDE was not like the first. However, I was given another incredible message, a meals per hour sizing. God is ageless. He is the supreme God of all creation. His absolute love for all his creation is eternal. Our spirituality, consciousness, and free will are his gifts to us. Evil continues to grow. That does it for today's video. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment below.